I'm 27, and I'm a big guy with a sedentary lifestyle. I went to a beach with my family the other day. My uncle and cousin asked if I wanted to snorkel with them. My overly confident self said yes, and I borrowed my cousin's snorkel gear while wearing jean shorts. I went swimming for about 15 minutes or so. Then they suggested to lose our life vests so that we could go deeper. I said yes without understanding that you need proper training to do this, and they've done it since they were children, not me. We proceeded without it, and all of a sudden, I found myself not being able to keep up. I tried swimming faster, but suddenly the water got into my snorkel. Fuck. I went up as fast as I could. I took the snorkel off, and a wave hit me. We were about 70 meters away from the beach. The water was about 6 meters deep. I panicked. I tried yelling, but more waves hit my face. My uncle and cousin couldn't hear me because they were ahead. I turned back and swam like there was no tomorrow to the beach. More waves hit me, and all of a sudden, with its impeccable timing, cramps. Both of my calves are seizing. I don't know if it was adrenaline or luck, but I managed to swim 50 meters to safety while having cramps in both legs. My uncle and cousin came back shortly after realizing I was gone. I went on playing with sand for the rest of the day to calm my nerves. So please, everyone, if you're going into the sea, have at least basic training and gear with you. Don't fuck around. This happened in the Bikernekku Forest, Riga, Latvia. It happened a while ago, back in late June or early August, 2022, at around 9 o'clock at night. It could have been earlier, but it was around that time. A friend and I decided to take photos in the forest. Everything was fine. Of course it was slightly scary, because, well, we're two girls in a forest and it's twilight. At around 9:40, my friend's mom calls her, saying we should go back to her place because it's getting late. Understandable. We will go to her place. I ask my friend if we can take the shortcut out of the forest. My friend agrees, which was our biggest mistake. While going through the shortcut, I see a guy in front of us. He was holding an axe in one of his hands, and he was wearing a horse mask. He was about 195 centimeters tall. He was slowly coming towards us. I take my friend's hand because I'm thinking we're about to die, and I tell her, do not go that way. There's a guy wearing a horse mask. She ignores me and continues walking towards him slowly. With no emotion, I just take her hand and force her to run the longer route. While running, I'm not hearing anything she's saying to me because I'm in a panic. I then see a woman walking with two average-sized dogs. I know I'm dumb for not warning her about the horse guy. We finally escaped the forest, and we're going to my friend's place. While walking to her place, she's asking me a bunch of questions, like what was that, and other stuff. She also mentions hearing that a guy was running after us. So yeah, we get to her place and talk about what happened. To be honest, I wish that was the end of it. In October of 2022, I'm casually browsing Latvian news and see some articles about a dead person in the same forest that my friend and I were in. Did we escape a murderer? This happened before Christmas when I was 26, and it sticks with me to this day. I've thought about sharing this many times, but I was never sure if it was scary enough. I guess you decide. My husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, and I decided to meet for dinner at a Christmas market here in Switzerland. He would pick up our dog from doggy daycare, and I would get there after work. Some things that are good to know. At that point, We'd had our dog for about a year. He's called Bean. He's a medium-sized dog, and before he came to Switzerland, he was a street dog in Italy. He was about 2.5 years old at that time, and he loved and still loves to get all the attention he can get. Also, Christmas markets are incredibly busy here, especially after work. People will meet there with friends to eat dinner and drink mulled wine. When we got to this Christmas market, we realized that it was way too busy to walk through with a dog, and I sent my boyfriend off to get my favorite street food, malawak. I waited at the edge of the market with Bean. Bean likes to greet everyone who looks at him, and by that point, I'd gotten used to talking with strangers because my dog wanted to meet them, so I wasn't too concerned at first when a guy came up to me. Full transparency, I don't remember word for word what was said. I'm not even sure what language this happened in. I do remember that Bean happily greeted this guy, trying to stand up against him and licking his hands. The guy asked for his name and what breed he is. I told him that Bean is a pincer mix. That's when the situation started to turn. The man insisted that he must be a Basenji. How could I say he's a pincer? All of a sudden he switched. There's no better word to explain it. He grabbed Bean's leash and said, "I'll go now," and just try to walk off with my dog. Thankfully, I had a firm grip on his leash. I was incredibly confused and flustered and just stammered out that he can't take my dog. He got increasingly more angry with every second that I didn't let go of the leash. I loudly told him to leave me alone, and Bean started to bark at the man. I've never seen Bean this angry and scared at the same time, and thankfully, the man let go of the leash and slipped into the crowd. I was left standing there, a dumbfounded mess with a mess of a dog. Bean was barking and shaking, so I knelt down to calm him down, holding him and talking to him. My boyfriend was still somewhere in the crowd, waiting for our food. After a while, a woman walked up to me and told me not to put my heel to the floor, as she had just seen someone put a poppet there. Now I don't know what is worse. Was it the same guy that tried to steal Bean? Or was it someone else who saw a distressed dog and thought, well, let's scare that dog a bit more? I think the worst thing for me was that apart from that woman who warned me, no one helped me when I was harassed by a weird guy, even though I loudly told him to go away, and there were other people standing very close just watching. Bean was the one who scared off the guy in the end. Thankfully, the events of that evening had no lasting impact on Bean. He still loves to greet strangers. I still remember it, and I don't think I will ever forget it. About 12 years ago, while on a 10-day hunting trip in northern Michigan, we were at a place called Dead Stream Swamp. We used to tent it back in these days, and it was about the third week of November, so it was cold, and there was about 6 to 10 inches of snow on the ground. It was time to call it a night. We got in our mummy bags on our cots and had a small battery-operated radio we would listen to while falling asleep. The Michigan backwoods get dark as fuck. I mean pitch black and eerie. I passed right out this night, but got woken up sometime later by my hunting buddy Dave, saying my name repeatedly. I was sleeping so good, I literally remember thinking it was the radio playing. Then I took notice to my name, and Dave sounded terrified. I said, "What?" "Dude, get your fucking gun. Get your fucking gun," Dave says. I'm disoriented, but I remember saying, "Why? What's wrong?" He then said, "Dude, someone's here." Now let me add, we were backwoods campers. We didn't stay at state parks or campgrounds, and we were a good 40-minute drive back in the thick Michigan Huron National Forest from any roads or civilization. We had set up our camp at the end of a very long dead-end 2-track. We had been there for 5 or 6 days at this point and never saw another person or even sign of someone else being out there. So I'm all like, what the fuck? And in my disbelief haze, I mumbled something like, what do you mean there's someone here? Did you order a fucking pizza? Dave says, dude, listen. Finally, I came to enough to realize the radio was off, but I could hear AC/DC blaring through the forest and a faint sound of an old pickup truck blazing up the 2-track towards our camp. I have a big 19-foot tent with a huge rubber tarp draped over it, so it was hard to tell there was a tent there if you didn't know there was. At this time, I realized this is wrong, and no one should be driving to our camp in the middle of the night, so I'm reaching for my weapon. Now the headlights were moving across the tent while the truck made its way through the winding 2-track, and it was within 100 yards of our tent. I finally heard yelling over the AC/DC, which sounded like an old drunk hillbilly screaming with a screechy-like voice, saying something about, "Hey, you fucking neighbors, get your asses out here." At this point, he literally had his truck about a foot away from the door of my tent and was revving his engine up. It blew my mind if this guy found us or even knew we were there. This was really odd. In all my fear, I racked a shell into my Winchester 20 gauge and screamed, "You better get the fuck out of here. I'm not playing around." The engine revved up louder, and his truck inched closer to the tent. I thought for sure he was going to run over us. I yelled as loud as I could, "I'm not playing. I'm about to start shooting." He must have got the message because he backed his truck up and left, but very, very slowly. The rest of the trip had a very odd feeling, and we never figured out who he was or where he came from. Way out by the dirt road where we had turned off of to get back here, there were 2 or 3 mobile home trailers that reminded me of the movie The Hills Have Eyes. Just very dirty. Lots of odd things hanging on the porches and junk everywhere in the front yards, like old fridges, junk cars, and trash. I'm assuming the guy lived in one of them, but we never found out. It still gives me the creeps thinking about it. I thought I was going to have to shoot him in fear of our lives. It was frightening, to say the least. In 2014, I moved to England from Canada to gain work and travel experience, and also to find myself. I ended up living in Essex with 3 other roommates. They were all women, all a bit older than I was. I was 24 at the time, Megan was 31, Cherry was 34, and Cassie was 38. Megan was from New York, Cherry from New Jersey, and Cassie from Poland. All 4 of us shared this 3-story flat. The back of our home was the living room and kitchen. The back wall was complete glass that looked out into the garden. The garden was completely fenced in. The house had an interesting dynamic, to say the least. Tons of stories from that time in my life. I adored all my roommates, except for Cherry. After living with Cherry for 7 months, I was over her antics. One day I come home from work. I lock the door, make myself something to eat, and go up to bed. I brought some work home with me, so I'm in my nightie with all these papers around me and my headphones on, jamming out. I had headphones on because Cherry was out to dinner with work friends. That meant booze, and then soon after, a tantrum was surely to come. I just didn't want to have to listen to her crazy scream crying. I'm working away, completely focused, until I feel something. I look up to see a man standing over me. I don't register it right away and passively say, Cherry's room is on the 2nd floor, and continue to work. Cherry regularly brought strange men home. He doesn't leave. Again, Cherry's room is downstairs, you. He then interrupts. I'm not here for Cherry. A cold chill iced my veins. My fight or flight kicked in just then. I started surveying the situation. I look him up and down. He has a bottle of Prosecco in one hand and a knife in the other. He's about 5'10", wild muddy brown hair and black eyes. He has a light blue polo shirt on, and one side of his collar is popped up, and he had a distinct Manchester accent. Once I focused in, I realized his eyes were black because his pupils were completely dilated. Shit, I was in trouble. I needed an escape plan. Unfortunately, this man was standing between me and my bedroom door. I needed to get downstairs, but I needed for him to think it was his idea. I decided to play along. Just then, he uses his knife to pop the cork. Prosecco started flowing onto my carpet. I said, "Oh no, let's clean that up. I prefer to drink out of a proper flute anyway." He nodded, replying, "Yeah, you're a proper classy bird. Let's go." I try to act as natural as possible. I try not to show that I'm shaking all over and try to gain control over my breathing. We take the long journey down to the main floor of my flat, all 3 floors. He has the back of my nightie bunched up in one hand, and I could feel the point of the knife graze my back with his other. I was trying to playfully speak with him as we walked down the stairs. I couldn't tell you what I was saying. I was most likely rambling. I couldn't hear anything over my heart beating in my ears. We get to the bottom of the stairs, and there's a hallway to my left that leads to the front door. On my right, which is much closer to us, is the kitchen and living room. We make our way into the kitchen. I point to the cabinets that had the wine glasses. He said he knew where they were, and starts towards them. I now had the kitchen table in between us. It was time to run. I burst into a sprint down the hallway towards the door. My hands fumble over the locks, shaking and sweating. I swing open the door and see 2 men walking across the street. They must have been walking home from the train. There was a big train station in front of our home. I call out to them for help, and suddenly I'm flung onto the ground. Little pebbles piercing my skin sent sharp pains where they jabbed. The intruder pushed me out of the way to run and escape. One of the men chased after the intruder, while the other said for me to go inside while he surveyed my home, and to call the police. I locked the doors and I called the police. While I'm on the phone with dispatch, I maniacally run around the house to double-check all the windows and doors. Suddenly, I hear a loud bang on my door. I inform the dispatch of the banging, and she informs me that the police weren't there yet. I thought it might be one of the gentlemen who helped me. I go to look out the eye hole, and it's him, the intruder. He came back. He's banging on my door, screaming that I had his glasses and that he was not done with me. I absolutely freak out. The dispatcher attempts to calm me down, but I'm losing my ever-loving mind. She then said, "They're pulling onto your street now. You should hear the sirens." I did, thank God. The intruder then blasts off. One officer jumps out of the passenger side while the car is still moving and chases after him. The second officer comes into my home, interviews me and the 2 gentlemen, collects evidence, takes photos. After some time of him being there, Cherry comes home and freaks out. Once the situation was explained to her, she said, "Oh my God, that could have been me." "Yeah, thanks, Cherry. It's all about you." The next morning, I'm called in to identify a man they had in custody. I pointed him out. I go into a little room, and the officer pulls out an evidence bag. He asked me if the items were mine. They were. There were my underwear and photos taken from my home. The officer informed me that the intruder had been stalking me for some time now. He estimates 3 months. He had made a nest outside of our home on top of a hill that overlooked into our living room and kitchen. He is a known sex offender and drug dealer. The officer then told me how lucky I was to get out, practically unharmed. Others weren't so lucky. To the man who stalked me and broke into my home, let's not meet again. However, I would love to run into those two gentlemen again. Every day, I am thankful for them.